let's do one more question.
Certainly. We'll take our final question from Eric Fairley with Edelman. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question. I think we've all seen the popularity of widgets in social media, and I'm just curious if that's a passe tool to use or if you guys still think they'll continue to be popular.
Once again, Steve, you may want to take that one.
Sure. Now, just to clarify the question, do you mean widgets that would live on somebody's blog or widgets that would live like within Facebook or an iGoogle? Just want to clarify.
They're both, really.
Yeah, I think widgets do continue to be exciting. I think that I have to go back and look at some statistics. If you send me your email, I could see if there's been an uptick or not. But I think that they are exciting from the standpoint, as I mentioned earlier during my talk about trends, that websites are going to become less important, and web services that really go inside kind of other sites are going to become more important. And widgets are kind of they're amphibians, and they're going to eventually become upright humans in that process. And so I think that the ability to have a website that has all these different spokes around it that can go and live in all these other websites, and widgets are the way to make that happen, continue to me to be very exciting, and I think it will evolve and become more social. I mean, the Facebook application craze, which seems to have died down, is an embodiment of that. But I definitely think that's a good area to invest, but I think it's not going to be a cure. You have to have other things around it that promote it.
Yeah, it's John here. If I could just add in terms of widgets here in Asia, we're seeing huge traction around bots, especially instant messaging bots, which again is a great way to condense huge amounts of corporate information and allow people to access it the way they want to access it. So in Malaysia, Maybank, which is the largest bank there, rolled their bot out around 9 months ago, and they've seen a huge groundswell in terms of goodwill and people feeding back about how easy it is to find out information about the firm.
And just before we wrap up, we're running out of time here. I wanted to ask one last question, and to me it's the million-dollar question. We get it all the time, but it really revolves around measurement. And, how does social media directly increase sales, for example? And do we have examples of that? I mean, I mentioned Blendtec earlier, and that is one of the more well-documented cases. But do each of you or any of you have any specific ways in which you've measured programs or that you've actually seen an uptick in sales due to a social media campaign?
Michael, it's Marshall in London. I'll go first. We just launched a campaign just in the last 3 weeks here for Wonderbra, which was a fun piece of business to work on, as you can imagine. But what's interesting about that is that we set a goal for ourselves of really driving sales, and there was no advertising or above-the-line spend on the campaign whatsoever. And happily, I can report that we actually sold out the whole line that we were working on prior to the line even going on sale. The pre-orders basically sold out the whole line, and they're frantically trying to make more. But it's a prime example in that case of we developed a holistic strategy that positioned the product and the brand and more importantly, the conversation and the story that's centered around a piece of film. We positioned that across a range of properties, from YouTube to a site we created to Flickr to an abundance of others, and really got a conversation going. But as I was talking about before, we thought about this as a narrative. We began that story weeks, actually months before the product was due to launch. So when the product actually did launch, by that point we were building towards a crescendo, which we reached at launch, and then we tried to sustain for a few weeks, and I think we've done that pretty effectively. And to me, it's just the perfect case that illustrates if you start a conversation, if you tell a story, if you really interact, and as Steve said before, offer a kind of win-win with your audiences, you will drive sales.
Wolfgang.
Yeah, and I can add some, let's say, little examples from Europe, because it always depends on your goals. You have to set some goals to measure them. You can't just say, well, let's do something, and then after that, let's talk about measurement. And there was, for example, a great program for a camera maker in Spain that needed to, have attendance on a conference. And they did it with blogger outreach, with a social media program, and so on, and had a great attendance and a much bigger attendance to that conference than ever before. Or another example I've been involved in Germany was a new ice cream that was brought to the market, and there was no traditional advertising, but only social media outreach, and it has been the most successful single ice cream from that big ice cream brand in this year. Only with engagement in our local Facebook clone, with a video, and so on. And these are some things where measurement and definition of goals have been upfront. So we want to reach, well, let's say 20 or 30 or 200 or 2,000 people do this and that, and if we reached it, and in these two cases, for example, we reached it, it was a success, and this was absolutely measurable, because everything is measurable on the web.
Good answer. Anyone else? Steve?
Just on the measurement thing, I mean, there's a couple of things. One is we need standards. We need standards as an industry. I mean, if I say, my friend Michael Wiley is tall, you have a picture of that. You kind of have an understanding of how tall is. It's around 6 foot or so. But we don't have that with not just social media, but with digital media. We're lacking standards, and I think it's very difficult for something that's moving forward. So I'm hopeful that the industry will begin to kind of coalesce around some standards. The other thing also I think is, is that there may not be a direct link always between sales and social media. Sometimes it's a means to an end. It's a way to kind of look at building trust, which then increases sales. So obviously at Edelman we focus a lot on trust. We have our trust barometer, which I definitely encourage everyone to go look at on our website. But it's kind of thinking about how engaging in these communities leads to relationships, leads to trust, and that leads to sales. So it might not be a direct corollary, but part of an ongoing process. So those are two areas that I'm hopeful to see more activity on in the coming months.
Okay, thanks, Steve. With that answer, I think we will conclude our webinar. Thank you to everyone for participating today, and please direct any follow-up questions to me, Michael Wiley, at Edelman.com, michael.wiley@edelman.com. Thank you very much for participating today.